Hello, every pony, and welcome to Inside Critical's Cranium, where we discuss aspects of the show, its characters, and the fandom as a whole. Today, I'd like to talk about perfection. In life, it's a great goal to strive towards, because you will always be pushing yourself to become better. In fictional writing, however, perfection is not something to be desired. If a character is too perfect, they are generally referred to as a Mary Sue. Gary Sue for male characters. However, this definition, although it is seemingly the most common for getting the concept of the term across to most people, is simply too narrow to give the term its due justice, and allows for way too many fantastic characters from fiction to fall into its clutches. Even upon doing my research for this episode of ICC, nearly every site I visited had a different definition of what the term actually meant. Urban Dictionary defined it as, quote, a female fanfiction character so perfect as to be annoying. Wikipedia defined it as, quote, an idealized fictional character, a young or low-rank person who saves the day through extraordinary abilities, and Springhole.net, a site focused on helping aspiring writers, defines a Mary Sue as, quote, a character, male, female, or otherwise, who is given or is expected to be given unwarranted preferential treatment and unearned respect, thereby compromising the integrity and believability of the story and or its characters. All these definitions are nice to consider, but to fully grasp the concept of Mary Sue, we need to go all the way back to the beginning when the term originated. The term Mary Sue comes from the 1973 Star Trek parody fanfiction by Paula Smith called A Trekkie's Tale, that appeared in the second issue of the Menagerie Fan magazine. In the fanfic, there is a character named, you guessed it, Mary Sue. She was perfect at everything she did, including being the, quote, youngest lieutenant in the fleet, only 15 and a half years old. She had all three of the major Star Trek characters falling head over heels in love with her, and always was the one to save the day. Mary Sue and stories that featured characters like her were criticized by one of the editors for Menagerie magazine in a quote saying, quote, the adventures of the youngest and smartest ever person to graduate from the academy and ever get a commission at such a tender age. Usually characterized by unprecedented skill in everything from art to zoology, including karate and arm wrestling. This character can also be found burrowing her way into the good graces, heart, mind of one of the big three, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, if not all three at once. She saves the day by her wit and ability and, if we are lucky, has the good grace to die at the end, being grieved by the entire ship. End quote. It's hard to say 100% for certain what a Mary Sue is. The term, with its age and different iterations, has become pretty vague. Some definitions focus on the fact that it's regulated only to fanfiction. Others talk about how it defines a character being an idealistic proxy of the author, while others mention all of the romance that seems to befall Mary Sue characters. However, personally, I like the definitions given by YouTube user Zexus the Silver and my friend Tommy Oliver that were included in their videos on the subject matter. Zexus describes a Mary Sue as, quote, a character that has no real personality flaws that negatively impact them in the story. And Tommy Oliver describes a Mary Sue as, quote, a character so perfect that they are never challenged by the events of the narrative. These definitions are able to encompass every aspect of a Mary Sue, while still being specific enough to avoid simply calling their perfection a flaw. Many characters in fiction have achieved some sort of perfection in relative comparison to the reader, or maybe even the world that they're in, but are still challenged by other forces in their world, whether internally or externally, big or small. Watching them overcome these challenges is what keeps the reader entertained because, whether them being victorious is a given or not, it is their journey to that outcome that fascinates us and drives us to care about that character. This leads me to the topic of discussion today, Twilight Sparkle. Some fans, like my friend Cider, claim that Twilight Sparkle, after becoming an alicorn princess, has turned into a Mary Sue. Has she, though? This is a big topic to wrestle with, so let's look at what we already know about Mary Sues first, and how that can be applied to Twilight Sparkle. First off, MLP is not a fanfic, so cross that criteria off. Secondly, she is not a proxy for any of the writers of the MLP staff to live through, so that makes two. Thirdly, she's only known to have one sole love interest, albeit a pretty cliche one, and she does not have all of Equestria, or even a sizable portion of it, losing sleep over her lustrous beauty. So all that leaves is how her personality and abilities affect the narrative in which she's in. This is where things get tricky and the lines become blurred. People will point to her being so gifted in magic, more than seemingly most of their ponies in general, and sometimes even more so than the other 3 alicorn princesses, as one of the reasons why she's a Mary Sue. Along with her magical abilities, people also believe Twi gets too much solo attention in a show that literally has the word friendship in its name. However, these aren't the characteristics of a Mary Sue. These are the characteristics of a main character. Being a main character comes with perks, whether people like to admit it or not. I get the sense that people feel like Twi has become a Mary Sue because, pre-Season 4, they viewed all of the main 6 as equal opportunity main characters, where one of the main 6 was no more powerful or important than the next. However, if you look closer, Twilight has always been the main character of the show, even from the very first episode. The first pony we see in the entire world of Equestria is Twilight Sparkle. MLPFIM always has been and always will be her story. Her friends are important too, and they will develop more than some of the supporting characters like the CMC or some of the antagonists like Discord, but Twi always has and always will be the most focused and the most fleshed out in the show. But critical, you handsome equine. What about how OP she is at magic, I hear you say? She is the element of magic after all, right? Well, yes and no. Twilight's definitely always been gifted in magic, more than most ponies, and that is what her physical cutie mark represents. However, just because Twi is gifted in magic doesn't mean she's special enough to be called a Mary Sue. Cutie marks, at their core, give every pony that same level of status. While someone like Carrot Top might not be as gifted in magic as Twilight is, Twilight can't hold a candle to Carrot Top's gardening abilities. Also, it's been basically proven that cutie marks aren't the end-all be-all either. Hell, we know of at least 3 ponies with music as their special talent: Vinyl Scratch, Octavia, and Coleratura. There can't be 3 ponies who are better than everyone else in the world at music. The fact that there are more than one makes that statement conflict. So I don't think that just because Twilight's special talent is magic, that means that she's the strongest pony in the world when it comes to magic. In fact, she's not the only pony with a magic-based cutie mark either. Starlight Glimmer also had a cutie mark with a similar meaning. Twilight isn't even the most powerful being when it comes to magic either. In Season 3's Magic Duel, Twilight had to resort to cheating when she lost to Trixie's alicorn amulet, and in Season 4's Twilight's Kingdom, even when she had the magic of all 3 other princesses plus her own, she was still defeated by Tirek and lost all of the magic she had. Also, it's worth noting that every time a powerful antagonist has been introduced, they were either defeated by the elements of harmony together with her friends, or by someone else entirely, and never solely by her own magical abilities. But I think it's also important to consider the following. Listen to what Twilight says in Part 2 of the series pilot.
You still don't have the 6th element! The spark didn't work!
But it did. A different kind of spark. I felt it the very moment I realized how happy I was to hear you, to see you, how much I cared about you. The spark ignited inside me when I realized that you all are my friends. You see, Nightmare Moon, when those elements are ignited by the spark that resides in the heart of us all, it creates the 6th element, the element of magic.
Now, consider the title of the show, Friendship is Magic. This isn't some arbitrary mishmash of cute buzzwords. This title means something. This title means that, in this universe, friendship can be synonymously viewed as magic. This means that when the writers say that Twilight represents the element of magic, they aren't referring to the ability she has to shoot laser beams from her horn. They are referring to her ability to spark and maintain friendships. This is why she's known as the Princess of Friendship and not the Princess of Magic. When you boil it down, though, what makes or breaks a character's Mary Sue status is the challenge they face in the narrative. So does Twilight still face challenges in the show? Yes. Yes, she does. All the time. Twilight never once has showed up and immediately solved a problem. Even if she reaches her goal in the end, There is always a journey to be had and conflicts both internally in her own mind and externally in the form of other ponies being the source. Pick an episode, any episode, that Twilight plays a significant role in, and you will find conflict. If anything, being an alicorn princess has given Twilight more conflicts in her life that she tries to overcome. In Rarity Takes Manhattan, no one respects her as a princess. In Twilight Time, Diamond Tiara doesn't even realize Twilight is a princess until the CMC mention it to her. In Twilight's Kingdom, she sings an entire aria about how she's uncertain about her role as a princess and expresses massive amounts of self-doubt. So yes, Twilight does, in fact, have lengthy conflicts. She is by no stretch of the imagination a perfect character. I think people look too far deep into her alicorn status and stereotype her by her alicorn peers, especially when it comes to Princess Celestia. I'd say that while Celestia is not a total Mary Sue, since there was that one time that she failed against Queen Chrysalis, and that time she was shown to have some kind of possible eating disorder in Ponyville Confidential, she is closer to being a Mary Sue than Twilight is by a long mile. She rarely struggles. She is the epitome of kind, and will gladly let ponies that steal her pets walk free, and she gets all the love and respect from her kingdom without question. Don't get me wrong, I love Celestia. She's my favorite princess among the four. But I think it's wrong to call Twilight a Mary Sue when Celestia embodies it way more than Twi does. Oh, I almost forgot to touch on Twi's tendency to overreact and stress out, which despite popular belief, has not completely left her. Exhibit A, party pooped.
Pinkie Pie, tonight's Yak Yakistan theme party is more important than ever. You'll make them forget all about this afternoon, right? Because if it's not perfect, they're gonna smash everything, and I'm not sure how much more smashing this visit can take!
I believe the saying goes, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, in the case of this character, if you can't stand the character changing, then stop watching the show. And I don't mean that in a cynical way. It's understandable that some may fall in love with the character exactly how they were in a specific season or a specific episode. Hell, look at how much flack Ninja Theory got for the new Dante by changing some of his characteristics for the DMC reboot of Devil May Cry. It's understandable, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing if people leave the fandom over Twilight changing. It is a bad thing, however, if people stay in the fandom and just complain about how Twi is such a Mary Sue. Hopefully, though, through this ICC, I've convinced some of you naysayers otherwise. As always, I'm Critical Thought, and I'll see you all in my next video. Never stop thinking critically.